Good evening. Welcome to Lori Blondeau in conversation with Franchesca Hebert-Spence. Lori Blondeau is Cree, Saulteaux, Métis from Saskatchewan. Since the 1990s, Blondeau's artistic practice in the fields of performance, photography, and installation, along with her curatorial work and activities as co-founder and executive director of the Indigenous Art Collective Tribe, has proved decisive to the ever-increasing centrality of Indigenous art and knowledge production in Canada. With her performances, which include Are You My Mother, Sisters, and States of Grace, and her photographic work, including COSMOSQUAW, Lonely Surfer Squaw, and Asinîy Iskwew, Blondeau's practice as both a solo artist and in collaboration with fellow visual artists, including visual artists James Luna, Rebecca Belmore, Shelly Niro, and Adrian Stimson, demonstrates a clarity of focus which is remarkable for its precision, humor, and strength. Her photographic and installation work has been exhibited in group and solo exhibitions at the Art Gallery of Windsor, Kelowna Art Gallery, the Art Gallery of Alberta, and Remai Modern, among numerous others. Her performance pieces have been showcased at Nuit Blanche, VIVO, Art Gallery of Ontario, and the 2007 Venice Biennial. Blondeau has participated in panel discussions and given lectures at the AGO, the University of Saskatchewan, the IAIA Museum of Contemporary Native Arts, and the 2020 Sydney Biennale. Since 2018, Blondeau was an assistant professor of Indigenous art at the University of Manitoba School of Art, sat on the advisory panel for the Canada Council Visual Arts Program, and served as a member of the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective. Blondeau was a recipient of the 2021 Governor General's Award in Visual and Media Arts. Franchesca Hebert-Spence is Anishinaabe, and her grandmother, Marian Ida Spence, was from Saskatoon First Nation on Lake Winnipeg, Manitoba. Hebert-Spence is an independent curator and writer whose engagement with her community is directly informed by kinship and its responsibilities. The foundation for this practice sprung from Ishkabatan's Wasaga Inabateg, Brandon University Visual and Aboriginal Arts Program. She previously served as an adjunct curator, Indigenous art at the Art Gallery of Alberta and a curatorial assistant within the Indigenous Art Department at the National Gallery of Canada. She is currently a PhD student in cultural mediations, visual culture at Carleton University, and is a fellow on the More So project under Dr.
Oh no, we froze.
We got her back. Okay, I think that was the end of my bio anyways, so that works out wonderful. Thank you so much, Bronwyn. We're really excited to get going and to have this conversation. I realize that there is some new work in, well, I wrote for the catalog, so I know there's new work, but I was hoping that we could kick off by talking about that a little bit, Lori. So that's okay.
The new installation that was commissioned by for this
Stones from My Cookham's House, or from My Cookham's House.
Yeah, Stones from My Cookham's House. So the installation consists of the gallery walls and windows have been draped in green curtains. I'm wondering if we should look at the video of the exhibition so that people can see before we get into it. I think there's a video that shows all of the work. I'm currently in one of the galleries. So if our tech can run the video of the exhibition, that would be great. I think it's about 7 minutes. So then people will have a visual to what we're talking about and not just our talking heads.
As lovely as they are.
Is the, can we run the video? Oh, here we go.
Until we know about
Okay.
Okay. So, the last images were of the installation, and I guess the only part that you wouldn't have had in there was there's an audio component, which is urban scape sounds, trains, birds, thunderstorm. I worked with Kenneth Gregory to do the soundscape for the installation, and I just, we just would talk about what I was looking for. And a lot of the sounds for me are very nostalgic, like the trains, like growing up in LeBret, like our house was right in, the train track was like just right there, like pretty close, like our house would shake. And I was thinking about that when I was thinking about the audio for the piece. And stones for my Cookum's house. So last summer when we were all down in lockdown or, going through this pandemic, I went out to visit my mom on my reserve on George Gordon First Nation. And my brother said, well, let's go see the old place, which is the house that my mother grew up in, besides growing up in residential school. And the house it was a sod house. It's not there anymore. It was burnt down, but still the foundation, you can still see the foundation. And the Carleton Trail goes through this property, which was a really important trail in Saskatchewan. And there was teepee rings that were there until some guy who farmed the land, he didn't realize they were he didn't see them, he said, and anyway, he dug them up. And so as a child, my parents, we would go out there every summer, and either we would camp or we would have a picnic, spend the day out there just exploring. We'd find my mom and her sisters and their old shoes and stuff, and the house was still standing at that point. But when I was there last summer, it was interesting because I noticed that around the foundation of the house, there was these rocks that made a flower bed. It must be my grandmother's flower bed. And so I asked my mom, can I take one of these stones? Obviously stones appear in my work quite a bit, and they're a big part of my practice, I think. Well, I guess, yeah, I'm looking around in this gallery. But yeah, so I brought one of those stones home. And then, and then the installation, the green curtains, I was just so tired of watching these press conferences with the governments, telling us their weekly report or their daily report about, what's happening with the pandemic. And here in Manitoba, our premier and the doctor would sit in front of these awful green curtains with these flags. So that the flags and the green curtains were inspired by being overloaded with news and just this pandemic that has affected all of us across this planet in such a profound way. And so that's where the flags came from. And I just wanted the flags to be white. I was originally going to do a screen print on it of the medicine wheel that's out in COSMOSQUAW outside of Saskatoon. It's a heritage park. And there's 7 buffalo jumps there and a medicine wheel there that's really significant in North America to medicine wheels. And I was going to screen print that onto the flags, but then I just thought, no, it just would be too much. Yeah, so that's that piece. And then with the green again too, I was thinking about, because Parliament, we would see when they were in session in Parliament, it's considered a royal green color, so it has to do with the Queen, obviously. And even if you look at England's Parliament, they have that green too. So that's where that piece came from.
Well, if you look at the roof of Parliament, it's same color. Yeah, it's a really good shorthand for bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I'm really happy the way it turned out, and it was designed for the space that it's in. So,
Yeah.
Sorry, my allergies are really bad right now. So we'll see if the show travels. There's plans to have it travel, but I don't know if people will take the whole thing or if they'll just take, you know, the gallery with all the photo images and the light box and the videos. So
it's really interesting because a lot of the work that you have within the exhibition is around memory and around like deep remembering and like these multi-layered kind of deep dives into an idea, and actually like often into like a family member or like that kind of relationship. So Stones from My Cookham's House, Are You My Mother, My Sister, My Love, all of these works, and then obviously like your Surfer Squaw and COSMOSQUAWs, they're inspired, or like they're for like the women that you were surrounded with when you were younger. And so there's this like expanding yourself, but also like when you were working in the women's shelter. And yeah, I just see this like ring of like relations happening.
Yeah, it's, well, you know, I was raised by and surrounded by strong women all my life. Like my mother had, she had 3 brothers. She actually had 4 brothers, but her little brother died when he was 3 months from influenza in 1938. And then there was 5 sisters. No, let me see. I might be missing some. Let me see. I got to count. I think, yeah, 5 of them. And plus my cookum, you know, and we would spend time with my grandparents in the summer. You know, we would go to the reserve and spend time. And my grandfather was a powwow dancer. So we used to go around to the different powwows. And it was very different in the 70s, you know, going to a powwow than it is today. And so, yeah, women have had a huge impact on my life. I think like most Indigenous people, we come from a matriarch society. And then working in Montreal at the Native Women's Shelter in the 80s and early 90s really had an impact. You know, Asinîy Iskwew was the founder of that shelter, and she raised money to get it built. And she was my boss the whole time I was there, you know. So, yeah, so a lot of my work comes from personal stories, or just thinking of collectively, like thinking of the Mistassini, like Asinîy Iskwew, like that was kind of came from the destroying of Mistassini, which was a very important medicine rock for us in Saskatchewan, which got blown up in 1966 to make way for the Diefenbaker Lake and the damming of the South Saskatchewan River. And there was protests. Wilfred Tutusis, the late Wilfred Tutusis, who was from Poundmaker, he organized protests and really tried to save the rock, and it was huge. It was a really big rock. And Buffy St. Marie, I think she protested with him, and they blew it up in the middle of the night. And so in one of the images for Asinîy Iskwew, they saved, it was probably on the advising from Wilford that, you know, we keep a piece. So one of the rocks in Asinîy Iskwew is that piece that they kept, which is it's at the marina in Elbow, Saskatchewan, and there's 2 plaques, one in Cree and one in English on each side that talk about it. And in that valley too, which is now a lake, Diefenbaker Lake, was actually a huge gathering spot for Assiniboia, Cree, Saulteaux people in like in the summer, there would be like, I guess, hundreds and hundreds of teepees. And there was a war, the Blackfeet. It was probably during, you know, the time the buffalo were disappearing and the, you know, people were starving, and the Blackfoot came and tried to sneak up on us thinking there was only a few teepees there, but when they came around the corner, they ran into, they saw, and they obviously were defeated. And there's
Obviously.
and then there's a plaque on the, I think, the 9th hole of the golf course in Elbow that talks about this battle that happened. So. Sorry.
Yeah. Sometimes you just see like these things sneaking into like conversation, and I'm just a little niche. I'm not involved in any of that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think like this idea around, let's talk about monuments. Because we're talking about like memory and like commemorating a place and what it means to like remove a place, or to like with stones from my cousin's house, we talk about like someone digging up and forgetting, like someone forgetting that the rings were there. And
but that's the thing. That's why they removed, like, that's why they blew up Mistassini. That's why they you know, cleared the plains. So a lot of our rock art and a lot of our ceremonial rock formations were, you know, decimated. Like, they were taken away, just like the buffalo, and just like the buffalo bones, right? Let's ship them off to England, and let's make fertilizer with them. And
China plates.
Yeah, it was like cleansing the earth of who we were as people, like leave no trace kind of idea. And the great thing that's happening in Saskatchewan, I'm not sure about anywhere else, but the Archaeology Society, there's people in Saskatchewan that go out and they'll find like medicine wheels, and they get them, then they register them with the Archaeology Society of Saskatchewan, and they become protected. So like not mining companies or oil companies can't touch them, which I think is a really good thing to have, because I have a cousin who lives in Kipling, and that's what her and her husband, they go out on the land looking, and they've found quite a few things. But yeah, like, those were our monuments, those were our markers, those were our history. Like, that was our history. And by taking it away is like trying to erase us, just like the residential school. But I thinking about monuments, because right now what's happening, like what happened here in Winnipeg on July 1st at the legislative buildings with the 2 queens being pulled down, I thought was pretty monumental.
Yeah. Well, to get that organized
and to do it safely, and then to have a government, well, our premier come out last week and do his press conference and saying that he's going to restore these monuments and put them back. It's Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, and to basically chastise the people who did it. And then just say that, you know, like, he doesn't once mention the mass graves that are being exposed right now, but all he talks about in that press conference was colonial settlers and how hard they came here and how hard it was and how hard they had
here to build.
And
good for you.
I was watching it with my mom, and I just had to get up and walk out. And then the other day with our new Indigenous and Reconciliation. Anyway, I just don't think I can go this direction, this conversation with my kid. It's such a heated thing right now, and especially in this city. which, you know, were the center of Canada. And so I think it was fitting. And then all the memes that came out were very monumental too. So,
I think the meme culture around activism right now is amazing. And also the TikToks. But I'll just say like one thing on that, and I'll shift. But yeah, I've definitely been thinking about that too, and really disturbed and upset, and disappointed. And I don't know. I think just a general blanket term for three different. If your reconciliation is like if it's conditional, it's not reconciliation. And that I think is what the biggest problem with reconciliation and that word and like this whole movement and like what everyone's putting their money into. It's conditional. It's based on like people's comfort and making sure that the structures that we're living in are maintained. And that is why I can't get behind it, because of this. So.
But that's, I think, of being an artist and making work is that, you know, it's moments like this that, because we're like history keepers too, right?
Yeah.
And it's moments like this that, you know, kind of drive you to make work. And it's interesting because I remember there was a time it's just like, oh, people would say about Indigenous artists, oh, your work's so political. Well, sorry, we had to be born political because of our situation. And so, and it was always about, I think, trying to put us into this category where, you know, that's not happening as much as it used to, because we have some of the best artists in the world who are Indigenous from Canada. And
well, I do think like when people say like your work is political, their work is just as political. If you're making formalist work, you have the privilege of making formalist work about line and color without someone asking you about your identity and wanting you and not questioning whether what you're making is art or not. That is a political statement. That's a political statement of your privilege. And I don't know. It just, when you reverse those lenses, it's just, I feel like it really helped me when I was in my undergrad, and like Captain Mattis would like talk about this and be like, no, what do you think this means? It just makes you feel a little bit more sane as you move through like these spaces. But yeah, no, the work that, sorry.
I was going to say, maybe we can sort of chat about the name of the exhibition. I'm Not Your Kind of Princess, because, well, everybody, you know, like if anybody knows my work, they know because of COSMOSQUAW and being sort of influenced by the image of the Indian princess, and then on the opposite end, the image of the squaw. So when I was working with Nazrin, you know, we were talking and I just said, well, I'm not your kind of princess, because everybody, like, especially growing up in the late 60s and 70s, you know, I don't know how many times I was asked, like, oh, are you an Indian princess? Or, you know, these kind of things put on you because of the stereotypes. And I think I still work with stereotypes, because I guess working with your body as a performance artist, or, you know, I'm in most of my photographic work, and, you know, so I'm working with the body because of the images of the stereotype of the Indian princess and how it was created. And a lot of those old paintings and even photographs were of white women basically dressed up, so they were images that we could, as Indigenous women, could never fit into, right? Because first of all, they're white, and it's, you know, you just, so a lot of my work in the beginning was trying to figure out, like, how do why do I want to fit in that image, and how can I strip that image down and sort of recreate something that would be a little bit more absurd? And, you know, and so it's kind of like taking it to the next level and, you know, thinking about, because I was just a diehard young girl in the 70s and watching, I used to love the surfer movies. Like I wanted to move to California and become a surfer. And I used to say that a lot of my research is based on pop culture while watching TV. I used to have long conversations with James Luna about that. And that's one thing we, I think, had in common within our work, because we loved watching movies and we loved watching old movies and we loved Hollywood, and, you know, and the late James Luna, though, he really was a superstar, and, you know, so he was always dressing the part. So yeah, he's missed, man. It's hard to believe it's been 3 years since he passed. There's a real loss to the art world.
The parallels in the conversations between your guys' work is like so there, like with both that came out very well. But yeah, there's like such a deep relationship between, and I think like one thing that I articulate a little bit in the essay is what gets lost, especially like when there's non-Indigenous writers writing about both of your work, is that like who this work is made for. So you weren't making work for white audiences to educate them, and like that wasn't James's intention either. Like it's for like folks in your community, for your kids, or for your mom, and the like positive effect of people like interacting with the work and being like, huh, I'm going to reevaluate my like relationship with white supremacy in women's magazines. Like that's great. That's a great response to have to the work. But that's not why it's made, and that's not the only reason why it exists. And
James and I also talk about the fact that we, you know, we show in galleries, and, you know, when I met him in 1997, and the fact was there wasn't a lot of Indigenous people going to galleries. So we may not have been creating our work for a white audience, but the fact was we were showing to mainly a white audience. I think all of that has changed. You know, I think Tribe played a huge part in changing the ecology of contemporary artist-run centers in Canada. And you look now, like how many Indigenous artist-run centers there are. It's just so exciting. Like we may not exist anymore, but we did something that changed the landscape of galleries. And I think that was the exciting thing about when James in 1997 came and did a performance at Tribe. He did a performance, a workshop, and a couple lectures. And he goes, I really want to have like a Native audience. Like, can you get me a Native? And I said, yeah, like, because we never had a space, right? So his audience at the Broadway Theater in Saskatoon was like so many Indigenous people came, like he just loved it. And, you know, and everybody went out after, we went out dancing, and he was just like, you know, he was just in awe of the community and what we had in Canada. And right till, you know, before he passed away, like he talked about like how different it was in Canada, and how it was so different from the United States. And, you know, he was good friends with like him and Rebecca and me, and, you know, he was good friends with so many Canadians, right? So.
I'm not sure if this is a conversation that we had before, or if I'm like remembering another conversation. But I remember someone saying that when art events were going on, like I entered the art scene in 2017, prime TRC year. And so like obviously the landscape, like it was completely different than like you would have experienced. But folks talked about how like when exhibitions by Indigenous artists were in galleries or grassroots artist-run spaces were putting on shows, as like it was more across the board, like Indigenous art movements, or individuals from like the entire Indigenous community. It wasn't insular, where like art people go to art things and music people go to music things. And I think that might have been a conversation that I had with a different artist, but I think the multidisciplinarity of like, especially like in Winnipeg, there's such a big theater scene that really cultivated a lot of the art and like the integration of like grassroots activism and art. Just,
well,
I'm kind of curious about.
I think that just happens. Like you go to Imaginative in Toronto, and you're not just hanging out with visual artists or media artists. There's dancer. It's so interdisciplinary, the group, and I think that's what is really profound about our community on a national level, that everybody supports everybody. It doesn't matter what discipline you come from, you know, and I think we're really good at it as Indigenous people because we had to fight so hard to get into the scene of contemporary art, whether it's whatever discipline it is. And now things have all changed and shifted, and you know, you can go to an opening and there's so many Indigenous people there from different, you know, different careers, different, you know, it's not only art people, also like, you know, there's business people, there's lawyers that support the arts.
Politicians show up.
And yeah, so I think that's one exciting thing. And, you know, and Indigenous people like have been fighting so hard, especially in the visual arts. Like we had Scana, you know, and before Scana, it was like the group of seven, the Indigenous group of seven that were fighting to get into the galleries. And I didn't realize until I moved here that Daphne Ojig had a show like in the 60s at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. Yeah, because it was earlier than the first show I thought happened in Canada. But yeah, like, so I think she would have had the first exhibition in a public art space as an Indigenous person. Yeah, so it's been great living here, and you know, there's so much history here, and just the history of Winnipeg and having the archive here. Although I haven't gone yet because, you know, I think Manitoba locks down way more intense than any other province. I just spent 3 months in British Columbia because my son had to have knee surgery and it got canceled. But anyway, just like when I went to Saskatoon, I was just like, this isn't lockdown. Like our lockdown, you can't even buy plates. They're not essential.
The entire store is like cordoned off.
Yeah, and then going to BC. And so I totally missed this last lockdown here, which I'm kind of thankful for because, you know, I live alone and going through a lockdown, you know, I actually, but it's just like for how many we've gone through here and how intense they are, you know, it's just, yeah. And now, you know, even now what our government is doing, galleries get to open up on Monday. And in order to get into the gallery, you have to show this card that he has produced, an immunization card, which I think is a real infringement in our privacy to our medical. And what about the people who can't get vaccinated, whether it's for health? So I don't know what this government here is about, but he's really like, wow, like to make galleries ask people for to put them in that position. Like, what is he trying to do? Like, there has to be, or is he just that stupid?
No. So
I'm sorry, I've had
it's like overcorrections. Like it just like from, and I think like just personally, like to see like this white dude in charge and to like see him crying on the podium because like he ran a platform that was based in essentially like granting people their freedom to do whatever they want, right? Like this idea of like minimal government interference, and to appeal to voters who don't want to feel like they're being controlled, that don't want to, and then to be in the midst of this pandemic and then have to be like, okay, well, we should wear masks.
Well,
first of all, like it's like to
living in a dictatorship.
Yeah, like for him to flip that is one, like super critical, and to like pump the brakes so hard and not be consistent. And the communication has been terrible.
But yeah, and it's unless you have your card, you can't come see my show. And my show is being closed down. It was open for a while, but it's being closed down, you know, for we opened up February, end of February, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Working on the new installation in January. And now people like, if they want to come see it, have to have this card. Like, it's just, anyway, maybe we should stop our tangent. Manitoba, it's taking up all our talk. But
I think like this idea of like permission into spaces and like bodies being impacted.
Had to have a pass and permit to leave the reserve. It's kind of the
like
same.
A lot of what's happening right now is like tapping into old trauma, or like trauma that like still exists. It's not old trauma, but like to live that again is just, I think, really difficult. And these are things that we have to. It's
Maybe to go to Q&A, get some people, if there's any people that are, we can't see who's here or see how many people are here. So, but maybe even anybody has questions, I think you can put them in the chat. You know, well, you guys are, I don't know, Scott can figure it out. Is there any questions, Scott? Oh, I don't think he can hear me. Should we talk about Are You My Mother? But there's no pictures of it.
We can talk about grace in terms of like permissibility and the Venice Biennial, and thinking about like.
Originally started out as, I had a Dan Ring from the Mendel, which is now the Remai, curated me, I think it was 2006. And I always wanted to do these photographs. There was something about this action of putting your hands in front of your face and in this two different directions that interested me for a really long time. And when I was in grad school, I thought, oh, I should do it. But then I got, oh God, no, everybody who works in photography in grad school does some kind of hand photograph. So I didn't do it. And then when Dan Ring invited me to have a solo exhibition, I did it, and it pertained to 7 stories of death, birth, and death, birth, and almost death. So I did, the 4 birthing stories were actually my own birthing stories. I have 4 children, well, they're adults now. And the 2 stories of death were from friends who were with people when they died. And then the surviving death was the story of my father, who was on life support for, the end of January till Easter, like April. And I was thinking about time, and I was thinking about that, like not analog time, not Western time, but just time, and thinking about how as Indigenous people we kept time, or, you know, with our winter count, or how we track time. And then I was thinking about time when somebody's born, not the time of the birth, but just when that child comes out of the mother's body, and, you know, time kind of stops, right? Like how we perceive time. And I was thinking about life and death, beginning and ending, and how in that moment where one begins and one ends, time doesn't exist. And so the images of the 7 people, there's 14 images, all represent one of those stories. And then I had an audio recording, and so for the opening of the show, I did a performance, and I sat on this platform. It was kind of regal, you know, it's kind of like this image behind me, but I was in a gallery, and I had clocks that I had made, and only one worked, and it went backwards. It's called a barber's clock. And that clock, each of the clocks, 7 clocks represented each of the stories, and the time was set at the time of birth or the time of death. And then the clock that worked represented my father, and it went backwards. Because when he woke up after his being, you know, in a medical induced coma and on life support, he said the thing that drove him nuts was clocks, you know. And for the performance, what I did was I braided my hair 7 times, and then I cut it off. I think earlier in my career, I used to braid my hair and cut it off a lot in performances. I think Ryan Rice at one point said, "Oh, we should do something about you braiding your hair and cutting it off in performance." Anyway, we never did. But yeah, so that's what Grace was about. And then when Ryan and Nancy Mithlow invited me and Shelly to be part of the Requickening project for the Venice Biennial in 2007, they wanted me to do the Grace. So it just ended up, so I did performed 5 days at sunrise and at sunset. And I only had the audio, and I would just sit in the chair and do this, and while the audio played. But it was amazing because the Italian people really got it. And we had these candles, which are kind of like prayer candles. I don't know if anybody, maybe Patrick could bring up the image. Anyway, so the Italian people really got what the performance was about. And there was this family, this mother and, or husband and wife. So yeah, there you can see the candles would, they came every day, like twice a day. They would show up early in the morning, and they're 2 kids. They're 2 young kids. So I was like, wow. Because some mornings in the beginning, there was nobody would be there except for like Shelly and myself, and Adrian had come and met us in Venice, so he was there, and Shelly had done the photographs. So yeah, so that was Grace. And I love the word grace because of the duality of the word. Like you could either fall from grace or be in grace. And that's why I have the definition on the wall in gold. Just thinking about, you know, the loadedness of the word grace. So is there any questions?
Carmen.
We have a couple questions. Yeah, I'll start.
Okay.
The first one is, it's been noticed that the color red is quite prevalent in a lot of your work. And what significance does it have to you, that color?
Well, it doesn't have to do with the missing and murdered women. I want to say that. I think for the color red shows up in my work because, you know, it's a color of power. It's a color of life. For me growing up and spending time with my grandparents, it was a color that would show up in different ceremonies and stuff. So I think that's why I use it. So in COSMOSQUAW, you know, I want to wear red and I want to have the red backdrop because I wanted her to be powerful. And then with, you know, Asinîy Iskwew with the rocks, I wanted to wear red because I felt like I wanted to honor these rocks. So it was more of an honoring. And yeah, it's a powerful color. It's a beautiful color too. So, you know, represents a lot of stuff. So. Is there any other questions?
Yes, I have one more. Lots of your work is quite large in scale, and is there a particular reason why you choose to work in such scale?
I think it was Ruth. It's not all that big. Some of it's large, some of it's smaller. When I think about, well, Asinîy Iskwew is large because of the rocks, and I wanted them large because of that fact. But I think it was Ruth Cutham when I was doing my MFA. She goes, make it big, make it real big. So I imagine that had an influence. She had an influence on me in that way. So go big or go home.
We have another question from Tanis Nesselin, and they wondered what you would advise to any artist who might currently be feeling the weight of collective consciousness of the recovery of our children and experiencing an inability to create because of the triggering nature of the recoveries, and they're asking for a friend.
Good question, Tanis. Yeah, we're having a really hard time right now. My mother, I just want to send out, you know, love and prayers to all the survivors. My mother's a survivor, and it's been a really hard last few months. A lot of tears shed. I think if you just feel like you can't make art, don't make art. But if you want to make, if you feel like you can, make art. Like before I was in BC when the Kamloops story broke, and it took me, I think, 3 days to call my mom because I knew that it was going to be triggering. And we also knew, she had told me stories at her school that there were graves there. And she remembers as a young girl, she went in the late 30s. She remembers them moving the graves. So she went to Muskowgan, which they were calling Lestock. There was 35 graves found there. And she told me when she was a young girl, she remembers them moving the graves because they were too close to the playgrounds. So I just think we need to do a lot of self-care right now and just take your time. I don't feel like making art right now. But it is, you know, this stuff is really, like, I don't know if people, non-Indigenous people, realize what a difficult time this is and how it impacts us in a collective way. But it's like my mom said, because I told her the thing I was most scared of was that, oh my God, what if they start checking every residential school in Canada? And she goes, they have to now. And she goes, now they're listening. now they're listening. And you listen to some of these elders from Kamloops yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, they did the report came out and they had a press conference, you know, and that's what all the elders are saying, the survivors are saying, like they wouldn't listen to us. So what were we supposed to do? Who were we supposed to tell? So now Canada, you have to listen. You know, why do we have to go so far to prove stuff to people in order for us to be validated as human beings and as people? And that's the most heartbreaking thing, I think, for me. And that Are You My Mother, that's a piece that I made in collaboration with my mother, because it was a story from her residential school experience. And you can see it, I think the Winnipeg Art Gallery has a video of it, because I remounted it for them. We just videotaped it, so it wasn't done for a live performance, but it was like a live performance, which was interesting, because I thought, oh, this is gonna be different because we're just videotaping it. But the 5 women that were with me, my assistant Annie Beach, and then the 3 videographers and Jamie Isaac, who created Born in Power, which is up at the WAG right now. It was amazing because just having 5 people there, it made it feel like a live performance. So that was nice to be able to do that. So, you know, I think work will be made, and I think just collectively we just need to check in on everybody and just make sure everybody's okay. Like I have to take moments from social media because it's too overwhelming. So take care out there.
I think like another thing is that old work will have new meaning, and that's okay too. Yeah, I think for me, I think it's really difficult like talking about it and to be what are your gifts? What are your strengths? And if you're like the way that you make art is slow and it needs time. I say that like my writing is kind of like when a dog tries to settle down to take a nap. Mm-hmm. I circle around something over and over again before like I finally like figure it out. And that's a process that can take months, as with the text for this exhibition. And then there are processes that take years, where folks like Barb Line, Kathy Mattis, or Pina Morin have said something to me, and it takes forever for me to understand things. Mm-hmm. And these processes are the same, not the same, but we don't always have to process things quickly. Mm-hmm. And
I think we have to move through it though and not get stuck. And this is, you know, this is where I think for us as Indigenous people and the survivors, this is where they can really move through it. And it was like one of the elders that was part of the Kamloops news conference yesterday had said, you know, like I didn't tell my kids. And my mother was like that. She never talked about it, and neither did my grandmother. And it wasn't until they came, I was living in Montreal, and I think I had my 2nd child, and they came to be with me. And we watched that film Where the Spirit Lives, which if you have a chance, I think you can watch it probably online somewhere, with Michelle St. John. Like that was the first time my mom or my grandmother, even though we grew up in a town in LeBret, Saskatchewan that had a residential school. My parents both worked at the residential school, or the one on my reserve on Gordon's, you know, but they just never I think it was just too painful to talk, like my mom to go at the age of 6. Can you imagine as a 6-year-old? Like I couldn't even imagine what that would be like for my kids when they were 6. Like, wow, you got to go and be in this sterile building, and then taught them a lot of skills there, Mr. Lajamorier. Which my mom said, we taught how to clean real good, and I think they only had like an hour a day of like real learning. So those children were there just to maintain those buildings for the nuns and the priests, and it was a big way of funneling money, from the government, and the government too has blood on their hands. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
We'll add on that CFS is the same thing. So that's still kids funding systems. But there's a lot of work to be done, and it's really it's okay not to be able to make work about it or to just breathe. It's okay to. It's good that we're breathing.
Yeah, and I think too, as being artists, like when you make new work and then you put it out there for the public, like there's like kind of a grieving thing that you go through with that too, right? Because it's just like, what are people going to think? And then it's like, after I do a performance, I call what I get post-performance depression, PPD. And it's because you have this really high and then you come down, and like I sleep for days. Like even when I finished installing here at Plug-in, I was just, especially making the new, like working on the installation for me was very different than doing it was more, felt like me more, there was more kind of threads to performance than there is to photography when you're working in installation. Because photographs, you do the photo shoot and then you weed through all the photographs and then you pick the ones. So it's a very different process. So when I was finished the installation here and got the rocks, and, because as I was going, that's where, I think I'm going to use ribbons, learned a lot about flags. Those little eagles on top are called finials. So. But anyway, so I think as artists, we just go through this process after we make work that, we just need to take this time and process it. And, and I think with this whole situation that's happening in Canada, because it's going to keep on going. Like there's going to be more and more and more. Like there's 100 and some schools in Canada that were in Canada. Not to even the United States. So I just wish everybody well, and I hope people just really take care of themselves, their friends, and their family. So I think, if there's no more questions, is there any more questions?
I think that was the last question.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Plug-in for hosting my whole life for us since March the year before has been on Zoom. Even our lovely host Bronwyn was one of my students at the U of M, and we finally got to meet in person this evening, which is great because it's so different seeing somebody in person that you had spent like 3 months with on Zoom. And let's just hope that our lives will get back to normal and that you won't have to use your card to come to the gallery, which I think is really unfair. So, we were managing without the cards before the galleries were. The galleries have been great with how they managed through this pandemic. So thank you, Franchesca, for being such a wonderful person to be in conversation with, and being somebody who's curated me quite a few times.